All right, the Hardcore Record Podcast, episode 19 with Rob Huddleston. Three chords, our truth, and the capacity we hold in ourselves. Words unended, exchanged in unison. Hellos, goodbyes, and see you later, my friends. We were all drawn to this to scream and shout out imperfections and frustrations, all while finding out who we are. Sometimes it begins, sometimes it ends, sometimes it gets picked back up again. It's a coming together of like minds. What you create is a gift, and you have given. The one thing I've learned over the years is that everything can shift the older we get, as to where it goes is still open. I am living and embracing myself in a way I only ever dreamed of, by reaching out and sharing that with whoever wants to listen. I hope it can become what some call inspiration to others, like this Richmond punk band has done for me. They have been a voice that has helped me define a relationship with the experiences I have lived in these moments that I've had with the music we all share. All right. Good morning.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite, man. Hey, I had a thought the other day. I don't remember from the records I sent you. Do you have the split 7-inch that Paper and Plastic did with was it Barstool Preachers, I think?
No, I don't think I have that one.
I'll have to send you that one too.
Okay.
I
Cool.
don't remember how, like, I think maybe I went digging, but I saw your Instagram post
Yep.
over the week, like just a few days ago.
Uh-huh.
Um, the one that kind of sparked that conversation where I sent you those records, and I was like, oh, I think there's one that's missing, and I think that's the one.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't
So
knew about that one. That's
I'll
cool.
have to send it to you. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yeah. I got some swag from the podcast too. I can send you some like
Oh,
stickers and
cool,
pins
cool.
and stuff.
Nice, nice, nice. How long you been
Uh,
doing this? The podcast?
Couple years, but
Yeah.
it's been just kind of like as I find someone to talk to, I do it.
Oh,
You know,
okay, cool.
for a while, a friend of mine, and we were just doing talking about old '90s hardcore records.
Uh-huh.
So we did a series of like two vinyl nerds for a little while, and we just
Oh,
kind of like
cool.
were just talking about records we owned.
Yeah,
Um,
nice.
yeah, so just to have fun and enjoy and get talking about stuff that so we don't forget.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. Well, that's cool. All
Yeah.
right, well, yeah, I'll let you run the show.
Okay. Um. So I guess let's go back and what was the moment that you knew, I guess, punk rock or like music, like you wanted to play, or what was the first like punk record you were like, this is it, man. This is where it all changed.
Um, where to start? Man, that's such a big question. So I think the first punk rock I heard, so like I was born in the 70s. I grew up mostly in the 80s, but back then, like, radio was amazing, man. Like it was,
Yeah.
every type of music. You would hear Springsteen, and then Zeppelin, and then Blondie, and then the Clash or the Ramones, like all on the same radio station. So I remember as a very young kid hearing some of the early Clash stuff, but it probably wasn't until the early 80s that I really started hearing the Clash a lot, and that was the band that I think changed things for me as far as like getting me. That was my intro to punk,
Okay.
and that was all through just radio. It was probably it would have been one of their singles, "London Calling" or something. It was probably the first punk song I heard on the radio, and that made me go buy the record. And I've been buying records ever since. But I think playing music was something that I think as a young kid, even like 10 or 11, I was interested in and thought like, oh, it'd be amazing to do that thing. I also grew up like, or I can remember, the first day of MTV and turning that on and just
Yeah.
being mind blown, in kind of the same way. Like, even there weren't as many videos back then, I guess, but you'd see, and still today, a lot of my favorite bands, I was introduced to by MTV. Bands like U2 and Def Leppard and other punk bands too. Sex Pistols. I think the first time I ever heard or saw the Sex Pistols was on MTV. But and later, when they started 120 Minutes, that show, that was my sweet spot in kind of my musical life or development. I think just that alternative music. But as far as playing music, it was something I wanted to do. I think very young in my life. but something I didn't know how to do, how to get started, and I shied away from it honestly until I was about 18, 17.
Okay, yeah.
So kind of a late starter compared to many, I think. But yeah, I wanted to play guitar. I picked up bass first. Classic mistake. I assumed, oh, well, bass is easy. It's only four strings, so I can learn that. Um, and then the funny story there is, and I was actually just talking about this with a friend the other day, but I was in high school. I was probably 11th grade, 17. My friend, who was a drummer, who played drums, was like, "Hey, we should start a band." But I didn't know how to play an instrument. So we went to the pawn shop. I bought a bass.
Nice. Yeah.
We went to another guy's house that he knew who played guitar. He was a few years older than us. He had already graduated high school. Um, and he was super cool. And he taught me a few things real, like just in that first interaction I had with him. And he was in a band. He had already made records. This is like 87, probably 88. And in that moment, he says, "Hey guys, there's a battle of the bands at one of the high schools in 2 weeks. Do you want to do it?" And we were just like, "Yeah, like let's do this." I don't know how to play. I don't know, songs or whatever.
Yeah, I love
Uh,
these stories.
and
Yeah.
we just, but the three of us just started kind of jamming like right then and there. He was like, "Oh, you've got it in the car. Go, let's plug it in. We'll start today." And so 2 weeks later, that was my first show. And then that was kind of that unlocked everything. I was like, "Oh, this is amazing." Just like it was a high school gym. It was a crowded room. We actually played really well. All cover songs. Some of the songs we played were actually his songs from his record, but pretty wide range of stuff. We played like an REM song, a Bird song. What else did we play? Bunch of his songs, and then also like a Dylan song or something. Like so, it was a pretty eclectic mix of things. There wasn't any punk involved in it necessarily. It was more like alternative rock and like
Yeah, yeah.
80s rock. But that was the start of it for me. And then that drummer and myself started a band, and we played only a handful of shows. And they weren't really shows. They were, just like backyard parties and things, kind of how anyone would start out. Um, but that's where it all started for me. And then I went to college, and that's when I started my first official band with some friends. We played a handful of shows. That band was called Veruca's Sweetheart,
Did,
after based off the movie, the Willy Wonka movie. It was one of the characters,
oh
and
yeah. Okay.
and it was also kind of named after that drummer's sister. So Veruca Sweetheart was the name. A few years later, that band Veruca Salt came out, and by that point, we weren't doing anything. But I think they were named after the same character. But
Did you hold on? Did you stay local to
yeah, that was
Virginia?
all local. That was all
Okay.
local. We just played on the college campus and stuff. But that didn't last too long. And then by that point, um, I was already friend. The guys from the Vale had just moved to Richmond. I don't even remember how I met them. I met Bo first. I think the first day he arrived in Richmond, he convinced me to sign him into my dorm, and he lived there for a week. Very very typical Bo, if you know Bo. But that's kind of that's how me being in punk bands started, through those guys. And I met and I knew Thomas and Mark a bit from the band Inquisition. That was my first band,
Yeah.
like first legitimate band that was making records and touring. And then when that band ended, Ann Beretta started in '96.
Nice. Nice.
That was probably a lot more than you you were looking for. Longer
No, no,
answers.
no. Absolutely. Whatever you wanna say, it's
Yeah.
up to you. It's all good. Um, all right. So then you start Amberetta
Hmm.
in, I guess. So you first put out Bitter Tongues,
Yep.
um, and there was a lot of different. Um, I guess there's you had. I know you had like backup singers on it, or a lot of people helping on that. So how was the
Yeah.
process of getting Bitter Tongues started?
Uh, so we started. So Inquisition. I'll take it a few steps back to answer
Yep.
the question. But Inquisition ended, I think, September of 2000 of 1995, 96, 2000. Man, early morning. September of '96, Inquisition ended. We played our last show, um, and that band was together. We were together. I was at least in that band starting in '91, and we spent all of our time playing and touring. This was the day of, DIY, book your
Yeah.
own adventure type of thing. Thomas and I would be booking the next tour from truck stops on the current tour, like booking things 6 months, 12 months out just because of it would take so long. Correspondence was much slower, Um, but we were so used to touring that we didn't know how to stop. And so Russ, the drummer from Inquisition, and I formed Ann Beretta. And that was September, like a week after Inquisition ended.
Oh
And
wow.
and we were on tour. We played our first show in October and we were on tour in December, which was absolutely nuts. And of course we were the ex-members of
Yeah.
on all the flyers at that point, but we did that and we were okay with it. I was totally fine leveraging the name and the audience we had built with the other band to get us started. Um, and so I think it was probably that very first. We had recorded like a demo of 4 or 5 songs that we had written, so we could take something out, and we just had them dubbed on a bunch of cassettes on that first tour. That
Oh,
cassette tape
that's right. That's the EP with the red background with the black rose, right?
that came next.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
so
jumping
we
ahead.
did no, it's okay. So we did this little cassette EP. It's a lot of the same songs as the Nobody Heroes EP that you're talking about. That was our first like official studio. We went into a studio, like a real studio, and recorded that and put that out ourselves. Those two things, that tape, started to get circulated pretty quickly around the southeast, and that CD, and they here's how just amazing just the punk community is and kind of the brotherhood, sisterhood that we all create from it. But Inquisition was friends with Hot Water Music. We had played some shows with them.
Hmm.
So of course I'm calling, Jason Black saying, "Hey, I've got a new band. I want to come down to Gainesville. Can you help me book a show?" Which he did. Um, I think we stayed at Chuck's house at the time. So they of course had the tape and the early demo. It then landed in Vinny's hands from Less Than Jake, who owned just really in I think a few years before that started Fueled by Ramen Records,
Hmm.
and I think it was the following spring, early summer, when Warp Tour was going around, one of the earlier Warp Tours. Just started getting phone calls from all kinds of people that I'd never met, guys in bands, guys for record labels, and it was all because Vinny had this cassette in on the bus and was playing it for people. And he was one of the people that called also. So I
Hmm.
actually got in. There were 3 people that I was talking to, Vinny being one of them. All 3 of them were in bands, different bands with their own little labels, and all 3 were playing Warp Tour. So I went up to Warp Tour in DC, met with all of them, and by the end of it, was certain that Vinny was the right person, Fuel by Ramen was the right label, and we had a record deal. And it all came pretty easy up to that point.
Hmm.
Meaning we just continued to work. Um, the band kind of took off very quickly because we had that ex members of kind of status to us. Um, but making that record, man, was amazing. We had already begun touring the U.S. Amberetta Hot Water Music kind of joined forces for each of like we had neither band had gone around the country before, and so like Jason and I booked this entire tour, um, and I think that tour ended up lasting like the two of our bands. Um, we probably toured together for better part of a year,
Oh
and there were a
wow.
couple bands that came in and out of those tours, like Discount and Hank Shaw from Florida.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and it was just amazing. And that was the building of our foundation. Like that was our core friend group, the bands, our peers, our comrades, and between the 4 of our bands, we just built these little packages and we would all tour together for, like I said, about a year. By that point, we had a ton of songs. I think we were a band. By the time we went in the studio to make Bitter Tongues, we had been a band for about 12, maybe 16 months, like less than a year and a half. and but we had a ton of songs, and we were continuing to write. So some of the songs that became kind of fan favorites on Bitter Tongues, like "Forever Family," that was
Hmm.
a song that was written about that Hot Water Music Discount tour, and was
Yes.
written on that tour. And then that was like the last song that we had written and recorded. We came home from that tour. Um, the way we used to do it back then, like we would tour for like a region. We would tour the southeast. We would come home for a week. We would go northeast, come home for a week, and then go out. The further we went, the longer we'd stay out. But we recorded Bitter Tongues in like a 2 week break between tour cycles. And so, you mentioned how many people were on that record. We treated it more like a collaborative. Like we
Yeah.
invited all of our friends. We invited the guys from Avail to sing on it. We Hot Water Music and Discount met up with us in Richmond at the tail end of recording that record, and then we started the next tour cycle. So of course both of those bands were on, and a song like "Forever Family," of course we wanted everyone on because that was you know the heart of the song was our friendships. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it was just about doing something with our friends, and trying to have fun with it, but make a difference. I look back at that record and very fondly, but also like I wish it was recorded better. I wish we had had more time, more money. I wish we had maybe edited. It's got a lot of songs on it. It's got like 22 songs or something. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe a handful of those could have come off and it would have been better. I'm not sure, but it definitely made a mark for us and like really established us as a band, and then as a touring band. We spent the next year coming back full circle to Vinny and Fueled by Ramen. We spent probably the next year and a half touring with Less Than Jake, and that was like going to college for us as a band. Like we learned how to put on shows, we learned how the business worked, we learned so much from those guys. And then through that, we met bands like The Descendants and All and Bouncing Souls and these other bands that were already well established and also people we could learn from. And so that whole tour cycle was just an amazing learning experience for us.
Nice. Um, I can see what you're saying, like about the Bitter Tongues album. Like now you look back and you're like, you wish you had
I think every
recorded it
record's like
differently.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But the way that it was recorded just adds to that, the ambience, the rawness, the
Yeah, it's a
energy
yeah,
of
it's
that
a very
time.
raw record.
You
It's
know.
I mean it's maybe a little too fast at times, but yeah, there's an energy there. We recorded it live for the most part. Like there's overdubs, of
Nice.
course, and we
Yeah, yeah.
re-recorded parts, but we were, especially in those early days, probably the first kind of half of the band's career, we wrote songs in practice as and there was always this kind of idea of, okay, we're playing these songs live. And I think here's where I really think we could have done better editing. We got in this habit of writing songs and then thinking like, okay, well, where's the mosh part? Where's the breakdown part? Where's the part where we're going to get the crowd bouncing? Because we were
Yeah.
thinking about it as a live performance instead of
Okay.
just like a song and a story. So I think there's a bunch of like just random odd parts in those songs that maybe don't make sense. But again, that was where we were at in that time, and it captured it really well. So and it resonated with a lot of people. And I don't know necessarily what about it. Maybe that's a question I'll ask you if that's okay. Like, I'm not sure what about it. I know what it means to me and to our band and some of our friends, but I've always been curious, like, what was it about that record that really captured people's attention? I don't know if it was the moment, the lyric, and the reason I asked this question too, and have always kind of pondered this is, we didn't know what we were doing. Again, I was only playing guitar for like a few years at that point.
Hmm.
This was the first time any of us were writing songs on our own. I was not a singer. I was not a songwriter at that point. So we were just making it up as we went along. And there was something about that too that made it a little more, I think, natural and real and less contrived. And so maybe that was part of what like, really, really hit
Yeah.
people. But yeah, I'm curious. I'll let you answer the question though. Like what, because I know through the chats we've had that, you've been a fan for a while. I'm curious, like, can I ask you two questions?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. So one question is just that, like, what do you think the attraction or the I'd love to hear what you think about Bitter Tongues. But then the second question is when was the first time? Because I know you're in Massachusetts. Like, when was the first time you saw the band?
So I thought it was 97 for many years, but
Uh huh.
then since Instagram, someone told me it was 98.
Okay.
You and Beretta had opened up for the Bouncing Souls at the Trocadero in Philly.
Oh, that's right.
That was when just the Nobody's Hero EP was out, and you had the split 7-inch with spray paint.
Okay. Yep. So before
And
Bitter Tongues,
yeah,
Bitter Tongues came out in the fall of '98, I think. Yeah.
so back then I'd always go to the whole show, but very rarely would I see like an opening band that I was like blown away by. So I loved it. Immediately right after your show, I went to your merch table and I bought everything, and I've never done that before. So you go back to like how you were writing back then and how you thought about the live performance, and that's what grabbed me was your live performance. I was like, this is just great. So then when Bitter Tongues come out, I don't really remember getting that album or anything, but I remember mostly listening to it.
Hmm.
And then so it just added to the energy of what I saw. And I think you were able to just be in tune with, like I said, like capturing that energy of that time. And big thing for me back then was lyrically. I'll backtrack real. Well, I'll add this in a little bit. For some reason, all my life I'd listen to bands, and I yeah, I'll get there. Hold on. So, and I would find I'm like, oh man, this band's from Richmond. And for some reason, a lot of my favorite bands I found out later on are from Richmond. So I was like, I don't really know how to describe it. I've been trying to describe it for now for like the better part of like a half a year of like, what is it, like why I feel so at home with bands from Richmond. But I grew up in New Jersey. So
Mm,
I only moved
okay.
up to Massachusetts like 10 years ago. Um, and so basically like central South Jersey near like the Jersey Shore.
Mm.
So going to Philly was no issue all the time. Um, but Bitter Tongues just had that punch, that energy, um, those hooks, um, that your lyrics just hit at those right moments. Um, in like I could take a look at that record in like I write poetry,
Hmm.
so I know how to write in a way of getting the words right of like how I want to convey it, and I just feel like Bitter Tongues was just able to convey all that stuff that you were going through, and that stuff that you wrote about just kind of conveyed across the board to many people.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you for that.
so
Yeah. No, that actually adds more context than I don't know that I've ever asked anyone that question before. So thank you for
yeah,
that. Um, yeah, that record was like, like I said, we didn't know what we were doing. I didn't know how to write songs. So everything that I wrote, and like I said, we wrote as a live band in practice. So a lot of times I was just mumbling and making up patterns of words that didn't mean anything in the moment, or it was like
hmm
very like just raw and coming out. And sometimes it was very instant, and other times it would take a while, or it might be we were in the studio making the record, and all I had was just some garbled nonsense and had to convert that into something. But I think because of that too, like what you're talking about, that kind of raw energy and like personal um, messages or storytelling, like I was just speaking first person. This is
hmm
just me right now. I was coming out of a band. I was, maybe had some bitter feelings about that band ending or something. I had relationships that weren't going well, like all the things that we all have in our early 20s, right?
yep,
And so that's all I knew. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna sing in a band, that's where I have to start. And it wasn't until many records later that I actually started getting into like, okay, this doesn't have to be about me. This can be about, which is I think
yeah,
was maybe one of the best moments in like my songwriting journey. Was like I just want to tell some stories and starting to tell other people's stories. Maybe they're wrapped in I, like from the perspective of me, but the stories and the lyrics and the inspiration were not my life anymore. And that maybe happened starting around the third record, I think. The song "Lipstick and Makeup," I think it's
Hmm.
on the third record, was maybe that first song where I felt like, oh, I'm writing someone's story, and this feels good. And that song was inspired just by a random, girl I happened to like lock eyes with on a subway in New York City.
Yeah.
And the next day, just that song came out, and it was I was telling her story or what I thought just from a glance across a subway,
Yeah,
what
what
the
could
story was,
be. I love
and
those moments in
just kind
life.
of made it
Yeah.
up. And that was a real turning point, and that's where I started getting back into like more acoustic music, like some folk singers, even singers like James Taylor, and also referencing some of those early Clash records. And Alarm was a big influence for us.
Hmm.
They all had acoustic guitar on it,
Yeah.
and so that's when I started just like sitting on the couch or the porch with an acoustic guitar, playing songs, writing songs. So that's where they all kind of started. And then we started making, acoustic records, and eventually that, like, the band indulged me to make the one. We had this concept where every other record would be an acoustic based record
Hmm.
um, that might have some of the songs from the previous record or whatever. But that didn't last long. I think by the time we did that with the other side of the coin, we then went in and made To All Our Fallen Heroes. I think it was a few years later I made the first Foundation record. But at that time, the band just wasn't interested. They were like, "No, that's kind of your thing. Like, it's not.
Okay.
We just want to play it. Like, even though." And so that record, and not to jump too far ahead or anything, or go into different. I'm kind of all over the place right now, but that record was always intended to be an Ann Beretta record, even though it was very, very different, and probably
Yeah.
better that it wasn't an Ann Beretta record at the time. But that record, I turned it into Fueled by Ramen. They listened to it and they were like, "Yeah, we think this is better if we present it as you, not the band." The album title was Foundation, and they were like, "We like that as a name. Can we just call this, like, why did you pick that name?" And I was like, "Oh, well, the acoustic guitar is the foundation of every song that we write. Like that's
Nice.
where they all
Yeah.
start." And they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, that's the name.
Yeah,
We'll
you
just
can
call,
hear that. Yep.
we'll call the project Foundation." And the record is self-titled, and that's kind of how that started.
Yeah, that so then I guess just as impactful, I guess as Bitter Tongues was for me, it was like that Foundation record. Um what year was that again? Because I
That came out in 2001,
okay, so that was 2001 and then
maybe 2000, but it was definitely in the earliest 2000s.
yeah, yeah. And that was again just as impactful to me. You could take, you know, those moments that you write about, and like that was my life. It was like it was shared around that time, and I think like sometimes like you did with Amberetta, like some people could just get so in tune with what's going on, with you're drawn to the scene, into this music for a certain reason, and you find the like minds that and that's almost why you're there. It's like, you just it just hits you. And like you said, I think we were talking earlier or like the other week, like who was really doing acoustic music at that time, like from the scene.
Yeah, not many.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was taking inspiration from other songwriters, from the couple punk bands, The Alarm being kind of the biggest one that was using acoustic guitars pretty prominently in their songs.
Hmm.
Um, and like I was saying earlier, I remember hearing those on the radio for the first time, and just being, and harmonica was on songs, and I was just like, "Oh, this is insane!" Like, and they call themselves a punk band. This is even better. I have to learn more about this. Um, but in the '90s, when MTV came out with the Unplugged series, like that was just my favorite. Like that was another big inspiration that I think people think it's a little cheesy that I talk about, but like for me, that show took some of my favorite bands and songs and stripped them down to something that I had never heard before. Thinking about, like, I mean, bands like Poison did it, The Cure did it, like all these
Hmm.
amazing bands. I think Kiss might have done one, but anyway, there was a ton of bands that were doing, and all genres doing that show. And so when I was in Inquisition is when I was like, guys, we should try this. Like, if our songs are any good, we can play them, we can strip them down and play them.
Yeah.
And begrudgingly, they were like, okay, well, maybe this will be an annual Christmas thing that we do, and we'll do an acoustic show. So Inquisition actually was the start of that. And
Oh,
um,
okay.
that would usually be like us as a band playing a bunch of songs, and then maybe Thomas and I would break off and play a handful of songs together or something. Um, but that's kind of where it started. And then when Ann Beretta formed, we continued that for the first few years, where every Christmas we would do an acoustic show. Um, but yeah, nobody was doing it. There wasn't Punk Goes Acoustic yet. There wasn't the
No.
comps. The record labels weren't paying attention to it, or coming up with it yet. So that first Foundation record in 2000, 2001, whatever it was really the start of that whole Punk Goes Acoustic genre. Like, and that's not coming from a place of ego. That's just, it's kind
No.
of fascinating.
Yes.
I wasn't the first to do it, and I don't take credit for that, but that record started a whole new kind of shift where like punk singers were picking up acoustic guitars and putting out records and playing shows and stuff. So that was pretty cool. I think while I was making that record, both Tim from Avail, Tim Barry, and Chuck Reagan both came in the studio while I was making that, and each of them said, "This is something that we've been wanting to do also."
Oh,
And I think so, and I hope they would tell the story the same way. But I can remember Tim coming in and going, "Man, this is different. It's cool. I've wanted to do this too. I just didn't for whatever reason."
yeah.
Uh, but he's like, "But now that I see it and hear it, and I see you doing it, like I think it might be something I try." So, you know, and Chuck and Tim took it to a whole different level than what I was able to do, or like what I ever did. But
Yeah. Yeah.
and still have a career doing it, which is amazing. So,
Yeah.
and then you think about all the other bands, trying to think of like Tony Sly, like all these other like punk singers going acoustic. It just started to become this thing, and then the comps started coming out, and I think Punk Goes Acoustic was maybe that first comp. We weren't even asked to be on it or included in it, and we were kind of jealous of all the bands that were, but yeah, that record really started that whole kind of movement at that time.
Yeah. So while I was looking up the years that stuff came out, we talked about like the Punk Goes Acoustic. There were also you were a part of the Experiments in Audio Rocketry comp
Sounds familiar, yes.
by 1, 2, 3, 4 Go Records.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yep.
You have like I think it was a Joe Strummer cover.
Yeah, I did X-Ray Style by Joe Strummer. Off
Yes.
of this, like kind of when he came back with his solo records. Yeah, that record was amazing, and like I said, it all came back to the Clash, right? Like, of course, Joe
Yep.
Strummer is going to pick up acoustic instruments, and have them pretty prominently on a record. But that record was just mind blowing for me, and it was. So yeah, we did that song. I think I forget if Thomas and I might have also done a cover of "Here Come the Regular" by the Replacements. That might have been a different 1, 2, 3, 4 comp.
Oh wow.
And then I did.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, there was a Replacements comp that 1, 2, 3, 4 did, and
Oh, okay.
Thomas and I, Thomas Barnett, who's now in Strike Anywhere,
Yep.
he and I did "Here Comes the Regular" by the Replacements. A really weird kind of like we had fun with it. It was a very like U2 inspired, I think, sonically. And then I did an acoustic version of "Aching to Be" by the Replacements for that comp.
Oh, nice.
And then
Nice.
and then I think you have this record. I think I've seen it. 1, 2, 3, 4 Go Records then did a 7-inch with me. I haven't learned. I was just thinking about that song the other day. That's on that. I need to dig that record out and listen to it because I remember it being pretty good.
Oh yes, I know. I can see the record now that you're talking
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was also one of the first records that had my name on it in some capacity where I wasn't like I kind of relinquished all control. Like I didn't create that cover art, which was like maybe the first time ever in the band's history, either band, that I wasn't the guy creating the artwork for it. And so that was kind of new and frightening and fun, just to have someone else's interpretation and love I don't even know who did the artwork for it. I'm sure it's in the liner notes. I'd have to look it up though.
Yeah. Um, so you get past all the acoustic stuff, right? And
Mhm.
you're going through, and at this point now, like I guess you get on Lookout. You have the new Union Old Glory. You eventually put out Three Chord Revolution, but it's more like sporadic and spaced out at this time. Were you just taking breaks? S-
No,
Um,
we were just touring longer between
okay.
records. Yeah, we never really stopped touring. The only reason to stop touring was to make a record,
Oh wow.
you know, and that's probably why we burn out the way we did by the end, or kind of the first end, when we really stopped touring. That was about 2004. But yeah, we just never stopped touring. We were always playing. So those records um, took a little longer to make and maybe write. I think we were also starting to, put some pressure on ourselves. When you've got a record label and they're wanting some product from you, and you're like, oh, it's got to be better than the last one, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be that. And I think even more recently, that pressure got to us,
Hmm.
got to me for sure. So they took a little longer to make, and I think, yeah, To All Our Fallen Heroes was our first record with Lookout, and then we did the New Union Old Glory record with them, and that was our first record as a three piece.
Okay. Gotcha. Um, and then so there was a point where, oh, hold on, let me backtrack for a second. My
Yeah.
thoughts. You, so you were touring all this time, and I always found your records coming out. I'm like, oh, Amber's got a new record coming out. But I saw you in '98, and then the next time I got to see you guys ever play again was just a few years back when you played Richmond on your two last, or before the last shows with Hot Water Music and Strike Anywhere.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was right
That,
before the pandemic. Like that was like the next
yeah.
week the pandemic started or something. Yeah.
And I went down and got to see you guys, but it was like all that time. I don't know why I never saw
Oh,
you.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was a strange thing, but like I went in and out of like different scenes for a while,
Hmm.
all over like the underground music. But what was I gonna say? So you guys did you take a break before the Rise record came out?
Oh, for sure. Like yeah, we did the what record was before Three Chord Revolution record. We put that out with a Canadian label, and typical fashion, we just went out and toured like crazy. And at the end of that tour, that would have been like late 2003, early 2004. Um, this is when things started to kind of unravel, and we came home from that tour, feeling a bit failed. Like this was a moment where, like, by the time this record came out, like I will say we made some poor decisions. We chose the wrong management, the wrong. Uh, this was our first time dealing with like real management, band management.
Hmm.
We'd had booking agents, we had labels, the entire thing, but we were also very much like in that DIY ethos, right? So we really stuck to that as long as we could. I think we made the wrong choice in a manager. We felt like the tour failed. We were shows were getting smaller instead of bigger. We ended a year prior to that. Um, we ended a tour headlining, playing to 1,600 people in Louisville, Kentucky. And then just one year later, now granted, social media is out, YouTube is out,
Yeah.
um, bands, people can see bands without having to go see them live. You can see them on YouTube or something if someone uploads it. So we started to see, and I don't know that that had anything to do with anything, but we started to see, I think a lot of bands started to see their audiences dwindle a bit. And so between that and like poor management decisions, and going on a tour that we just felt like, I was advancing, or our tour manager or myself were advancing shows, like a week ahead, and find out there was no show, but it's on our itinerary, but there's no show. And so that just felt like a big mess. We were tired, we were stressed, we didn't, we had this new problem that we were facing. We came home from that tour and we just, I don't think any of us said it out loud, but it was the first time we didn't have something planned next. We didn't come home knowing when we were leaving again. And I think that in that moment, we all just quietly secluded ourselves. I don't think any of us spoke for about a month.
Oh wow, yeah.
And that wasn't, there was no bad blood, there was no anything. We were just burnt.
Hmm.
And so at that point, I think after a few weeks or a month, we all got together to plan what we were going to do next. And I think we all sat down saying like, I just don't know if I want to tour anymore. Like I need a break. And that was a really like interesting moment to think like, okay, well, this thing that we've been a part of for almost 10 years now it feels like it's ending. And what do we do now? And that for me personally, and I can't speak for the other guys, but for me, that was, it was a bit traumatic, honestly. Like that for me was, um, really difficult time, like the next 12 months. Like I don't think I picked up a guitar for almost a year. Um, I was questioning who I was now that I was not the front person of a band, and that's not what I was known for. What was I going to do with my life? Who was I going to be? Whatever. Um, so I went through like a year of like just depression and questioning everything about myself and my worth and was I any good at anything. Um, and finally, like I said, it took about a year, but then finally I picked up a guitar and started just kind of playing a little bit. And that's when I started, I decided I wanted to do another solo record, an acoustic record, but I wanted to be a full band production.
Yeah.
And basically, all of us from Ann Beretta became that foundation band structure for that Chimborazo record, that second record. And we started playing shows under that name, and we just had fun. We didn't care how many people showed up. We didn't care like you know who else was on the bill necessarily. It wasn't like who are we playing with, who are we opening for, who's opening for us. We just went out there and played songs that we liked,
Yeah.
and we had a good time. And after doing that for a couple years, I think we all got the itch to play faster and louder, and that's when Ann Beretta started playing shows again. And we didn't really tour. We got invited to do festivals like Gainesville, like Pooza Fest, and so we did a bunch of fly dates. We were like, if we play 5 shows a year, that's cool. That'll keep that itch scratched. And so we did that for a bunch of years, and we actually had a final, like what we thought was our final show. We were like, okay, we did that for 2 or 3 years. I forget when it was. It might have been 2008 or 10 or something. We played. I think we didn't plan on this either, but I don't know if you remember the band Weston.
Hmm.
They were coming through Richmond and called and asked if like we would be interested in playing with them. And at that point, with us being local, they would open for us, and we were like, and so the irony there was Weston was the first band that Ann Beretta played with when they came through Richmond. That was our
Oh.
first show. Was
Oh
us and
wow.
Weston.
Yeah.
October of 98. No, 96. I'm sorry. October 96. And so in my head, it was like, oh, well, this is like come full circle. Like we're playing with Weston. Maybe we just don't do this anymore. And we were all like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's fine. We weren't touring. We weren't using this as a job. It wasn't paying our bills. It
Hmm.
wasn't, it wasn't income necessarily. It was just fun, which is what we had been missing for a long time.
Yep.
Um, and so at that point, we were like, okay, yeah, maybe this is our last show. That's cool. And it was very like nonchalant, not very committed, not very like anything. It was just like, yeah, okay, cool. We just won't do this anymore. Um, and then that didn't last very long. We became one of those bands that played a couple, maybe three different last shows. Um, but it didn't last long. We were like, man, we were just having so much fun. Um, and so we started playing shows again. It was probably like a year later, maybe a year and a half. But then the pandemic hit. So I think to get back to Rise, the last record we did, like I had written a few songs. We as a band had written a few songs, um, starting in about 2012, maybe 14. But to your like your earlier point about records taking longer to make, like these songs we were out of practice, and that was kind of a learning moment. It's like this is a skill that it's a muscle that has to be exercised, and when
Mm-hmm.
you stop writing, you stop touring, you stop moving, that momentum stops also. And so in my head, nothing was ever good enough. And this was another one of those moments of like, if we're going to do something, if we're going to write a record, if we're going to write new songs, it has to be better than anything we've ever done. And we must have written 50 songs worth of parts and just tore them all up and hated them. Didn't There was maybe two or three songs that stood out that would play live, or that eventually made their way onto record. But it wasn't really until the pandemic that I think part of it, like I was going through, like I said in my head, like it had to be good, it had to be better. Nothing was good enough. I started going back, I think very fondly back to Bitter Tongues and thinking like I want to reconnect with that version of me and the band and us and what life was like.
I can
Um,
see that on that record. Yeah.
and well, so interestingly enough, like everything that I started writing was very much in the spirit of Bitter Tongues. It was faster. It was, I think falling back into that. Well, here's a random part where people are going to bounce. Here's the mosh part. Like, even though I was just writing the songs kind of in my room, we weren't really practicing much, because of the pandemic. Oh, actually, no, that's not. I forget where I was in my story. But we weren't really practicing a ton, but I was writing songs. But when the pandemic came, I think that was the first time that I felt inspired in probably a decade.
I know what
Um,
you mean. Yep.
and what I mean by that is like, so we did, you know, you couldn't, there was no social engagement. There was no like live shows happening. And I started seeing other bands and people do like what was called quarantunes on social media, where they would just play a song, post it.
Yep.
And I was, oh, that's really cool. I should start doing that. And I had no expectation. I had no intention of doing anything as a result of that. But what I started doing was I would play one song a day and post it on Instagram.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And they were, when I filmed them, it was a one take. So it was raw. And if I messed up, I messed up. If I forgot a lyric, I forgot a lyric, which I do all the time. Um, and it was just, this is just is what it is. I'm gonna put a tripod with a camera in front of me. I'm gonna record a song. I'm gonna hit post. Um, and that was amazing. It was a worldwide connection through social media. I mean, people from Germany and London and Japan were commenting on things, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So this started to build its own momentum. I thought, I'll do this every day for a week. But people, the more I did it, the more people started paying attention to it, and I started getting requests and like deep cuts in the catalog, and I was like, oh, that would be fun. Let's just keep doing this. And so I never had like a timeline of how many I would do, how long I would do, but I did them every day. And then after a few weeks, it got to be a lot for me. I was like, I have to go back and learn a song. So every day I was like learning a song or relearning, kind of practicing it, and then filming a video. Um, so after a few weeks, I dialed it back. I just did Monday through Friday. I took the weekends off to kind of decompress. Um, and then on Fridays became like cover day. So
Hmm.
that took a little stress off me. I would just play one of my favorite songs or a song that the band had covered or something. Um, and that was cool. I got to revisit a lot of songs I hadn't heard or listened to or thought about in a bunch of years. Um, and then, mind you, like during this time in the pandemic, we've got, you know, politics are insane as they still are. George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, like all this stuff was happening, and I suddenly, after doing the quarantines for 60 days, I was like, I just want to do something new. I'm inspired, and so, and I guess maybe part of this conversation, I'm realizing like coming full circle is maybe a pattern, but on day 60, day one I played Forever Family. Day 60, I played Forever Family. That was the only song that got played twice out of 60 days.
Uh,
Um, and even during that time, during those 60 days, I think once, maybe twice, I played a new song that we hadn't recorded yet, but something I was just kind of noodling on, and just to get feedback on it. I was like, "Hey, here it is. Tell me what you think." Um, and all of that kind of happening in that moment was just inspiration for me to sit down and write songs. And I kind of threw away this idea of connecting with Bitter Tongues or like doing a Bitter Tongues part two type of record, and just let it come out. And this was the first time that we had not written as a live band. I was just writing by myself from start to finish. I think I wrote 16 songs in 2 weeks, and 12 of those, I think 12 of those songs ended up making it on the record. But that was a very different process, and I think this is where we had, because it was a different process, there was a bit of like maturity that took place. We collectively, like I wrote songs, I demoed them on my laptop. I took them into Pedro, our guitar player, has a home studio. We made our last couple records with him in his studio, completely just doing it on our own, which is a whole different thing that we can talk about too. But so we I took the songs to the studio. I can't play drums. It's like
Hmm.
I can't even try. Um, and I wasn't sure yet that I wanted to share the songs with, like, we weren't able to get in a room and practice at this point, like, safely, so we just didn't. So it was like, how can we trade songs back and forth? And I was talking to so many of my friends in bands, and they were all doing the same thing. They're just like, oh, we're just trading files now and writing that way for our next record. So I had Pedro, like he and I sat in the studio for an afternoon, and we took all the demos that were bass, guitar, and vocals, and then we added, just he programmed drums to it, just to get an idea, just to get their
Hmm.
tempo right and get an idea of what we want to do. And then I sent those songs to Russ, our drummer, and he gave a lot of great feedback. He loved the songs. Um, and so we decided, well, let's make a record, guys. And that so we took those demos. By that point, things were starting to loosen up a little bit. I rented just like for a couple weeks, I rented a practice space, and Russ and I would just go in and workshop the songs, and that way he could put his flair to them. He could add his drumming style, his input. Some of the songs changed a little bit, but not dramatically. But that was like the first time those songs, I was like, oh, I don't know that I can play and sing this. I don't know that, like, it was a very different type of writing. And
Yeah.
when we got in the room together, I was like, man, like, I don't know that I can sing this and play it. And so that I had to work through that too, which was fun and interesting. But from that, we went in the studio, we made the record, and I think I was actually just listening to it the other day. It's definitely my favorite record that we've ever done. And I think it comes from that. I think your last record is always your favorite record. Um,
Yeah, I get you.
but for me, it just felt like a turning point personally and for the band, where, like I said, that maturity had finally gotten there. And I think the songs are better crafted, and the lyrics are better than anything that I'd done before. Some of those songs, mind you, I got in this habit of, maybe half of those songs had lyrics and the other half were just music from start to finish. Um, and so when we started making the record, we recorded those, recorded all the music, of course, and then started going back and putting vocals on things, and started with those 6 songs, 7 songs that had lyrics and were written all the way through. Um, and then I got into this habit, this is where I really reconnected back with Bitter Tongues. I was like, you know what? Like, whatever comes out is going to come out.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to stress, like, these next 6 songs. I'm not going to stress the lyrics as much. And what I would do is, I would go in and do one song a night vocally. Um, an hour before I went to the studio, I would go to the coffee shop down the street and I would write the lyrics for that song, just free
Nice.
form, just like,
Yep.
uh, you know, subconscious, whatever, just like free form. I would just start writing. Um, and then I would go into the studio and for the first time sing them to the music. And so some things changed, some things like some things worked, some things didn't quite. But in that moment, I would make the edits and I would change, right? Like if a line wasn't working, it's, maybe Pedro and I would collaborate and say like, okay, well, how about this word instead of that word, or this phrase instead of that phrase. But about half of that record, the lyrics were written an hour before I went in and sang them. And that became a fun process, something that I'd never done before. But again, it reconnected. That was kind of the connection back to Bitter Tongues of, like I was describing earlier, writing songs in a live setting where I might just be mumbling or coming up with a melody but not knowing what I'm saying. Like that's I kind of went back to that mindset for Rise. And at the end of the day, like I said this earlier too. Like there's of course things that listening to it now, like there's one or two songs where I wish we had done a little more, or a little less, or a little different. But yeah, I still that's one of our for me that's one of our finest moments and records. And we did it all on our own. There was no label behind it. We went in, we self-funded it. We spent more time on that record than we had ever spent, in part because we were working around all of our day jobs too. But that record, I think, knowing that that's the last record, like that feels good. Like that feels like, and kind of going into writing that record, there was this idea of like, oh, we might not ever do this again. And some of the songs even touch on that, which like the last song on the record. But yeah, it was such a rewarding like moment to make that record and like do it ourselves without the pressures of everyone else. I just wanted to give the record away, truthfully. Like,
Yeah.
streaming services wouldn't allow it. Like that's the only
Oh,
reason.
okay.
That's the only reason that people are paying for the record is because, I got to a point where I was like, I hope people like this. I don't care if anyone hears it. I want the people that want to hear it to hear it. There's not going to be any promotion. I mean, we finished recording the record. I sent it off to Mass Giorgini, who was we've been doing some work with him over the last few records. He mastered the record. He was in Screeching Weasel and Squirt Gun, so we knew him from the Lookout days. So he
Okay.
mastered
Yeah.
it. And he mastered it, and within a couple days, we had it up on all the streaming services. Like so, it was that instant of a process. Like the record was finished, it was mastered. A week later, it was available, and then we just let it go, And that was a really cool for us to do, also, just to put that out there and just kind of let it go and let it take a life of its own. And we played a handful of shows, to launch that record. We actually traveled a bit out of town. We did a Philly record release show. We did a
Yep.
DC maybe, and we definitely did a Richmond show. Um, Couple things, so sort of regionally, but we went out and did some record release shows, and then came home, and some other things at that point started to happen, like the last show we played as a band, and this is legitimately our last show, was what was it, June something of 2000, probably 2023, I guess.
Hmm.
And by that point we were just like, okay, this is kind of run its course, and the closure was there finally. I think that's what the 8 or 10 years in between were missing, was closure. Like we didn't go into making the Three Chord Revolution record thinking this is going to be the last time we do this together, or this tour is going to be the last one. It just abruptly happened. And so I think with this one, we were in just total control. We felt like, okay, we've kind of done what we set out to do. This feels like the closure we've never had, and so ending it now feels right, and it feels good. And I can't imagine a time that we'll go back to it, which I miss, admittedly. Like that kind of breaks my heart a little bit, but it's just time to do something new or different, if anything at all. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I am playing a show in a couple weeks, which is the first time, just a week ago was the first time I picked up a guitar in almost 2 years, legitimately, to like strum it and play a song and sing a song, just to get warmed up for a
Oh wow.
show that I agreed to do in February in Richmond. So, but that's just me by myself, solo show. So that should be fun. There's, again, no stress, no pressure, but in the back of my head, there's a ton, just because I haven't. There's a lot of fear right now running through my head, just trying to get ready to play in front of people again. But it feels good.
Gotcha. Um, so with the Rise record, when that came out, I was like, oh wow, unexpected, to be
Yeah.
that powerful, but in a good way.
Oh,
Um,
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, that's how I felt. And telling me the story now about how you came about that, how you did it with like no label backing, you guys just did it your own way. Um, Now, labels are good. I'm not trying to say anything bad about labels, but I
Yeah, sure, of
really
course.
feel like that's the best way that I guess a band could create a record. No pressure.
Yeah, and
You got to find your own voice, your own way to play, your own way to do it. Um, and that's awesome that you guys feel that good about it.
yeah, and I think it kind of goes all like those moments, like what you just described, are all the things that I think I was wanting and hoping for when revisiting Bitter Tongues. But my initial take on revisiting that record and trying to write songs that would feel like it got me to the place of I don't want the record to sound like or feel like Bitter Tongues, but I can reconnect with the way I was feeling during those times, and I can write differently, I can play differently, I can say something that I think might matter to someone. And so yeah, it was those
Yeah.
moments, like those really subtle behind the scene moments, and the way we made the record, the DIY aspect of it, like that all reconnected to Bitter Tongues. And then again, we invited our friends because now with technology you can trade files pretty easily. Everyone's got a laptop or a home studio. So having Chris from Less Than Jake, having Thomas from Strike Anywhere sing on the record, like that was a phone call or a text message. Hey, can you do this? Would you
Nice.
mind? Would you
Yeah.
like to? And they both jumped on it. Um, I thought about asking more people to be on it, but then just decided like I didn't want that to be a gimmick.
Yeah, I got you.
Like I was worried like, oh, okay, well if every song has a guest appearance, then the songs are going to get lost in the idea that oh, this band just has more famous friends on it to sell more records, and that's not what the point was.
Yeah.
So
Um, I just want to touch back to where you were saying how that one last tour you did where you eventually took a break,
yeah.
and you were saying how, like you were headlining to a whole bunch of people, and then it, like you said, it kind of start drop off. And I think around that time, people just got older, and
Hmm.
then like you said, like yeah, YouTube, all the videos were on YouTube, so you could kind of sit back. As you got older, maybe most of us started a family or starting a family, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
wondering, like what are we doing with our lives? Like we have to do something, and I think that was just a theme back then. It just kind of like leveled out. There wasn't like that younger generation there within the scene yet.
Hmm.
That came like a little bit later, as it is now. You know, and
Yeah, and
it's an interesting time. You know,
yeah, and that's a good point too. Like because that's exactly where I was in my life too. Like trying
yeah,
to, I was getting a little older. I was, getting closer to 30 or maybe was 30. Trying to start a family and being married and all these things. So I mean, even that made it difficult at times to focus on the band. But yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. I think the thing that with all of this that I think is most unfortunate is like you and I grew up in an age where the way that we were introduced to new bands was to go see them play live,
yeah,
right? And now it's just like, streaming, Spotify, random recommendations on whatever platform you're on or YouTube or whatever. You don't really have to go see bands. You don't have to find bands anymore. And that was I think kind of the romantic period of our community was just really like you felt invested in the band because you found them. Like because you went
yeah,
out and sought them out. Like you went to a show, you had like your story about seeing us for the first time with the Souls and not knowing us as the opener. Um, those moments would happen every weekend if you let them.
yep,
And like so I remember the late 80s, early 90s just going to see bands play like at least once a week, if not two or three times a week, and just being introduced to like so much new music and seeing bands for the first time, and then maybe like I mean I can remember seeing the Alkaline Trio come through Richmond and playing to like 12 people on their first time through in the smallest, legitimately the place is called Hole in the Wall, place that maybe only holds 30 people.
yeah,
But then year after year after year, and then you become friends with some of them. You start to see the crowds get bigger and bigger. The one thing I don't miss about that time though is kind of like the punk rock rules and all the bylaws of you're not punk
Yeah.
unless or if you do this.
There was so much judgment back then. It
Yeah,
it really
so
was
I think that was maybe the
weird.
one thing that kind of hurt us all during that time, but certainly not so much that it. If you wanted, I think if you wanted to do it, you were determined to do it. You would get yourself out there, and that's kind of the mindset we had. It's just like we're going to put in the work to get ourselves out there and to get in front of people, because we grew up on the other side of it in the audience,
Yeah.
watching the new band, watching them take off, watching them get bigger, feeling like you were part of them because you found them. That one Sunday matinee you happened to walk into the club or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I miss those. I miss those days a lot.
I remember my sister's older friend would take me to like hall shows or college shows
Yeah,
in mid central Jersey, and like I got to see hot water music like before like high school time,
yeah.
and it was great. Um, but we'll backtrack to I guess your original question when we first started talking here about like how did I start this, because I started doing the podcast because of that reason, going to shows and seeing bands. So
Mhm.
you can go on platforms and find bands. But what I do is I've it's taken me a long time, but I've catered my Instagram so I could get flyers from the shows in the area. And then I'll just hop out to a show where I'll take a quick look, a quick listen to the bands, and I'm like, oh, okay, I like the style. I like what they have. And I'll put it on my calendar, and then depending on how I feel, I go out to a show now.
Oh, that's
This
great.
is, and if I like the band, I go and talk to the band and tell the band I like the band. I said, and that was my point. Because getting older, I love going to see music. I love going to see shows. I make it a point to go see, have a bucket list of bands, that I've never seen before that I want to see, and I'm trying to get that connection back. So
Yeah.
the bands
Oh,
I'm
that's
talking
great.
to on here is people I've talked to, people I've seen, people I've interacted with, and that I liked. You
Yeah.
know, they're not always punk, they're not always hardcore. It's not always nothing, but that's what I try to do now. You know,
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
so
awesome. Yeah, I think it's funny. Like we've talked a lot about hot water music, but they were just coming through Richmond maybe a month ago, and I went to see them, and legitimately, it was the first show that at least local in town that I'd been to in years, and it was
well,
so stressful. It was so stressful. Like I was so excited to see my friends and see them play, but in the and this is going to sound really odd probably, but especially locally, in Richmond, like I mean, there was a moment where like many of us were treated like royalty, like us and Avail, and the earlier days of Strike Anywhere, like we could go anywhere and everywhere we wanted. We could go to the clubs for free. We didn't wait in lines. We drank for
mm,
free. All the things, like all those like really selfish benefits of being in a popular band. But I think I went to this show and I hung out on the bus or whatever with the guys, and then before they went on, I went out to play, and of course the show was like packed, which was awesome. But it immediately started to stress me out. I was just like, okay, well, like I had forgotten going back to like same as songwriting is a muscle. Like being social is a bit of a muscle, and I was like, man, I don't know how to turn on anymore. Like I don't know how to
yeah,
connect with people. What if someone wants to come and talk to me or say hi? Like all this stuff like surfaced, and it stressed me out to the point of like I watched 4 or 5 songs and I left. Just because I was getting looks or people would come up and talk to me, and it just like stressed me. I went there to see my friends, and I should have appreciated more that people wanted to still to this day like see me and talk to me or like ask me questions or whatever. But it hit me in a really weird way in that moment and just scared me. So I'm hoping I can work through that and kind of get past that so I can start like you're doing, going to see just random shows. That would be
um,
amazing.
yeah. I can't say that I know exactly what you're going through. Never been in a band or nothing like that, but yeah, social anxiety comes up big time. I have many failed moments where like I want to talk to someone, and it's just a failed conversation or it doesn't work
Yeah, yeah,
and you're so awkward and you're like, oh man, I look like an idiot right now.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
and
gonna I'm
that's how I
gonna
feel.
bounce. This one didn't work out. I'm done. You
Yeah,
know.
and that was those were the thoughts that were like going through my head in that moment, and do somewhat regularly if I am somewhere out. Like I don't know how to be social anymore, man. That anxiety is real.
Yeah.
But yeah, I question like, and I'm sure I'll do it later today after we're done with this conversation. I'll be like, oh, did I say something stupid? Did I come across as a jerk or like having ego or like whatever? But yeah, I guess you just gotta let go of that stuff and not worry about it. I don't know. Or
Yeah.
you just
Yeah.
gotta put yourself out there. Like maybe that's the way for me to work through it. Is just like I just need to start going out. I've shied away from it for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I did. I think one of the most enjoyable moments I had recently was seeing this metal band Skywall, and they were just like embraced '90s metal, and
Oh yeah,
like
awesome.
we had this like geek out interaction about like metal bands from the '90s after their show, and it was just
Oh
like
cool.
a moment. So I'm like, okay, so you can have these moments.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, and it is. It's not easy getting out there, but um, it's fun when it works out.
yeah, for
So
sure, for sure, for sure. And I do miss those days of like, I mean, that was just. It sounds stupid to say it was part of the job, but like part of touring and being on the other side of that conversation, being the band, and like meeting people and learning what they think of you and your music or how it might have impacted them, like that was part of the drug, man. Like that was really great, like being social in those moments. I think I love them and I miss them, and it pains me to think like, oh, I can't do that anymore, or like I'm not as good at that anymore, and did I act appropriately when someone came up to talk to me or whatever. But yeah, I mean it's amazing. I will tell you, like i've I've mentioned this in other conversations over the last decade or something, but one of the most meaningful interactions I've ever had, and it's happened to me 3 times, but the first was the most impactful. Meeting someone at a show who came up and said something to the effect of, I was contemplating suicide. I didn't want to live anymore. I heard your song. I listened to your record, and I'm here today because of you. And that's fucking mind blowing, man. Like, like I think in your head when you start a band and you start playing live, like you want to make a difference. Like
mhm.
there's a lot of reasons to start a band, like art and you know fame, whatever it is you're searching for. But at the end of the day, like there's always this, I want to make an impact. I want to change someone's life. And when someone actually comes up to you and says, like after a show, like, "Hey, I am alive because of you," like that is fucking insane, but so meaningful. And that's happened to me a few times. But this one girl, the first time it happened, it was actually in Philly. I think it was at one of the what's the church, the big church in Philly that
First Unitarian Church.
First Unitarian. Yeah, yeah. So we did a show there, and it was out in the parking lot after the show. But this was a girl who was maybe 15 years old, 16 years old, telling me this, and like it was heartbreaking, but like inspiring at the same time, and like it made me feel good about what we were doing as a band. Um, but when I think about it now, like 20 years later, 25 years later, whatever, it's having that like did not get the fame that we maybe hoped for, did not, we're not still doing it, the longevity wasn't there or whatever, but at the end of the day I can go, man, there's 3 people out there who are alive because of songs that we wrote and a show that we played or whatever. Who knows what those people are doing? Like cancer could be cured by one of those people. They could raise the next,
Hmm.
they could, have a kid who becomes the next something. Um, you know, leader of the free world, whatever it might be, like as grand as it could, you can build it up in your head. Like it's that's the thing that I look back on the most fondly is just like the few conversations I had with people where the impact was life changing for them, and it's and they at least themselves um, would claim that it was because of a song or a band. That's just so insanely meaningful.
Yeah, we got you go through like this whole life in the underground, and it's like you grow up with all the bands that you listen to. So like the bands and the fans get each other through.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly
You
it.
know,
That's
you
exactly
you
it.
grow up with these bands. You grow
Yeah,
up, you know, and they become a part of you. You know.
yeah. And what's even crazier, you mentioned earlier, like we all are getting older and lives are changing. It's been really interesting, and I've heard other friends and bands talk about this too, of like this idea of your crowd is aging with you. They are starting families and have kids who are teenagers, and they're bringing those kids to the shows
Yeah.
and reintroducing you to a whole different audience. And I mean, yeah, easily the last like 10 years, we saw that every time we played a show. Like it was, maybe a third of the show of the crowd was under the age of like 17,
Hmm.
and they were there because of their parents. It was like it's very cool to see like that kind of passing of the torch, so to speak, or like just a family, a parent and a kid going to see the parent's favorite band and then becoming a connection for them, but
Yeah.
also something new and inspiring for that child, that younger person, right? So yeah, that's also very cool. I think like just generationally seeing the crowd change, kind of grow with you, but also seeing it change.
Yeah. All right. Um. Well, I think we pretty much covered, everything that I was
Yeah,
thinking
a lot.
about.
Yeah, sorry, I was kind of rambling a bit, but
No, no, no.
you,
That's
you
what this
dug
is
up
all
some really
about.
amazing memories, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, no problem. Sounds good. All right.